We're holding on 2b, and we did a big piece of Gemara yesterday, so let's go over it. So we had a discussion of the Mishnah, which was about Kinoi and Stira, about the amount of witnesses you need, and the Gemara mentioned that the Mishnah is talking about Kinoi and Stira about the witnesses, but it doesn't mention about witnesses for Tumah, for the actual if someone caught them in the actual act of sin. This man that's hanging out with this married woman, in the actual, if he was caught in the actual act of sin, that's called Eidei Tumah, witnesses of Tumah. Now, what happens if you have one witness for that? So here we have a special law that if there's one witness that catches them in the act, so if there already was a warning and they already were caught with being secluded, and now you even have one witness that sees the act, that witness is believed to the extent that it will cause this married woman to lose her ksuba. It'll cause them to be prohibited forever, and she won't be able to drink the Sota water. And so the Mishnah mentioned cases, or at least one of the cases, where there's an argument between Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yeshua, how many witnesses you need. However, in the case of Tumah, everyone will agree that one witness will be acceptable, and we have a proof. We have another Mishnah that mentions this. The Mishnah says, Ani Ra'isi Shenitmes. One witness says, Eid Echad. One witness says, I saw that she became Tameh, and the Mishnah says, Loi Haisa Shaisa, she does not drink the Sota water. It means we assume, we are confident that she is impure. One witness is good enough, and the water no longer would have a purpose because we know she sinned. One witness is good enough. And the reason for that, well, we'll have to see how you see it in the pasuk, and the logic behind it would have to do with raglayim ladavar, which means that we've had too many hints to this, and if there's smoke, there's a fire, and so this is the one witness will be good enough. Now the Gemara goes into how we know that from the Torah. In other words, forget about the logic behind it, but what's the source of it in Torah that we could trust one witness? One witness generally is not good enough in Judaism. And normally you need two witnesses. So what's the source for this unique law? So the Gemara brings a brisa that goes into the verses. In the verse, it says about Sota, the aid ein ba, that there's no witness. And the question that the Gemara is dealing with is, it says it in a singular, the aid ein ba. However, we do have some type of a limud, an expounding from the Torah, that whenever it says witness, singular, it really means two witnesses. And so the Gemara says, it says v'eid ein ba. We're going to translate it to mean you don't have two witnesses, but you have one witness, and she's going to be prohibited. If she wasn't raped, she's going to be prohibited as long as you have one witness. Because it says eid ein ba, you don't have two witnesses. We're translating aid to mean two witnesses, even though it says it in singular. That's not surprising, and we have a source for that. And therefore, that's how we're understanding that one witness, everyone, even Rabbi Eliezer, will all agree that this one witness is believed. Again, not to give her the death penalty, not to give the man that she's had the affair with the death penalty, because that we would need two witnesses, but at least to prohibit her from drinking the Sota water, and that would prohibit her from being with her husband, and from eating truma, and so on. The brisa says, how do you know that the word aid means two witnesses? The brisa says, well, we have another source where it says eid echad. And if aid means one witness, then why would you need to add the word echad? It must be that aid really means two witnesses. Unless it says echad, then you'll know it means one. So we have a little source that whenever it says aid, it must mean two, because why would it say aid echad? If it says echad, it must mean that aid could mean two, or it does mean two. And here, you want it to mean one, you have to say aid echad. So we have the source that aid always means two. Now, if we take that idea back to the laws of Sota, so what we're going to say in the case of Sota is that the word, now we're going to fit it into the words of the paragraph about what we're learning. So the words say, the Dainba, that she had this affair with this, she had this friendship with this paramour. And there's not, you don't have two witnesses, it says. The Dainba, you don't have two witnesses. You only have one. And she wasn't raped. And she's going to be prohibited. And so we have an understanding that a woman that had a warning and she was caught with going in seclusion, and we have one witness to the sin, the act of sin, the full-fledged act, there's a witness that sees it. So in that case, she's going to be prohibited, and she's asura, she's prohibited. Not to husband, she's prohibited to have a relationship with with the man, with her paramour, and she's going to be prohibited for truma. She's prohibited. So the Gemara asks that, do we really need a proof that it says lo yokom echad biyish? Would you really think that when it says there's no witness, in the case of Sota, that she's going to be prohibited even with no witness? Obviously, the case of Sota means two, and you don't have two witnesses, you have one witness, and therefore she's prohibited to her husband. In other words, how else are you going to learn? You want to learn that it means that she's prohibited after, in this case, it's ve'ed ein ba. She doesn't have, so what do you want to tell me? That I need to know, what does aid mean? Does aid mean two witnesses? You don't have two witnesses, but you have one? Or does aid mean you don't have one witness, you have zero witnesses? And the law is that she's prohibited, and you have zero can you really learn such a thing? Do you need to come through a whole expounding of some other verse to come out with this idea that that aid means two, and you don't have two, but you have one? What else are you going to learn? You don't have one. It means one. And then what was the verse saying? And you don't have one witness. The aid ain ba. You don't have one witness. You have zero witnesses, and she's prohibited. That doesn't sound normal. Why would she be prohibited if you have zero witnesses? So the Gemara says, no, we really need it. Because you're not going to say the aid ain ba. You're going to translate it differently if aid means one witness. You're going to translate aid means one witness, but you'll translate the other words differently if that's the meaning. Otherwise, you will be stuck. But there's another way of translating it, and it would work. And therefore, we need a proof from a different portion where it talks about aid. And aid, it says aid echad, and therefore we know aid normally means two. We need to prove it from somewhere else, because there is another way of learning it. The aid ein ba means one witness is not believed. That would be the other way of understanding this. That one witness, v'aid ein ba, and one witness is not trusted. And then the Gemara says that if you learn that way, why do you need to tell me that one witness is not trusted? The pasuk could just be quiet, because we know all laws need two witnesses. So if you want to tell me something special here, you only need one witness, then say it. But if you want to just tell me it falls into the regular category of two witnesses, then don't say anything, and we'll know that you need two witnesses. One witness is not believable. I don't need you to tell me that. That's something that you learn in kindergarten, in a yeshiva. The first day you enter, you need two witnesses. Everything is based on two witnesses. So why would the Torah need to spell it out? So therefore, the Gemara says that a person might think that Sota is different, because you have a raglayim ledavar. And you might think, because you have the smoke, which makes sense that there was a fire, there's a possibility that maybe you don't need two witnesses here. Maybe one witness would be good enough. Again, we're still talking theoretically. We're not telling you the final halacha. We're saying you could learn it this way and translate the pasuk in this way and come out with this conclusion. And you could do that. Again, it's all in the academic realm, where we're not saying that this is the final thing, but this is the thought process that you might think that because there's raglayim ledavar, which means because we have things that lead up to this understanding that she sinned. And you gave a kinui warning, and there was a stira, there was a time that they went into seclusion, and they were secluded together for sufficient time to sin. And then you have one witness, there's room to say that she would be, that one witness would be believed that they sinned. And therefore, we need a verse to tell you that aid, ein ba, one witness is not believed. And that's the way you would translate it. That aid means one, and one witness is not believed. And then you would translate it that way. So the Gemara says, yeah, but how would you end up concluding that she's prohibited, that she's prohibited? One witness is not believed, and she's prohibited. It doesn't flow. If one witness is not believed, that means she's permitted. So the Gemara says, yeah, you have to sort of like add a little wording over there. Meaning you have to have a little understand. You have to understand it with embellish the wording a drop. So basically, the word what it's saying is the aid ein ba, that one witness is not trusted with her, but until you would need two. And even if you have two, it has to be that she wasn't forced and she wasn't raped, and then she will be prohibited. You have to add that really you need two. One is not enough. You have to add what you're implying, that really you need two. And even with two, she's going to be prohibited only if she wasn't raped. And that's the conclusion. That's what you would think. And then come back to what the real interpretation is, and that is that you don't have two witnesses, but you do have one witness, and that's sufficient to prohibit her on her husband, even though you only have one witness. And that was the conclusion of this piece of Gemara. What comes out from this Gemara is that the whole concept of Sota, giving a woman to drink the water after she was warned, and then we caught her transgressing on the warning, and she went and was secluded with this man. We don't know if they sinned for sure. The law is that normally she gets to drink the Sota water. However, if there is one of the witnesses, even just one, that saw that she actually sinned with this man, in that case, we will no longer give her the water to drink. She no longer gets the Sota water, and instead, she is prohibited to her husband. She's prohibited to the paramour, and she is prohibited to truma, and she does not get her kasuba, her money from the divorce. And that's the conclusion of this Gemara, that one witness does do something, that the pasuk here teaches us a special law about the power of one witness when it comes to this type of a case. That even though we normally don't believe one witness, but here we do believe one witness.